do this one because several people have tried this one and they're running into all kinds of problems. This is not the easiest prompt. It's inevitable that traditional cultures will be lost as technology develops. Technology and traditional cultures are incompatible. To what extent do you agree or disagree with this view? When we analyze this question, what do you have to talk about?
The impact of technology on traditional culture?
Yes. And more specific, yep, go ahead.
Yeah, there is like an opposite relationship between the technology and traditional. As we are go far with the technology, the tradition will be less.
Mm-hmm. So, do you agree or disagree that technology negatively impacts traditional culture?
To some extent.
Okay, can you explain how? Now, keep in mind, if you're getting to what extent do you agree or disagree with this view? This to what extent phrase really screws people up because when people see to what extent, they start thinking, oh, I partially agree, I partially disagree. In real life, if you were in university and this was the question assigned in your course, yes, you would give a balanced, nuanced response. I agree to some extent because in this way it helps, but in that way it hurts. But on IELTS, because it's so short, and because they're telling you that your position on the issue has to be clear throughout the response, don't give a balanced, nuanced answer. Take a black and white perspective and either say that you agree or disagree. Okay. Give 2 reasons why you agree or 2 reasons why you disagree. Okay. The examiner doesn't care what you really feel deep in your heart. They just want to know that you can answer the prompt in a standard essay format. It's much, much easier to do this if you just give 2 reasons, either for or against. Okay, so what's one reason either for or against?
Like television, like drama, or the movies we are watching, they are impacting our traditional culture, the way we eat, the way we dress up, the way we socialize. All the things are changing because we are in the TV. We are watching something different.
Mm-hmm. To give a strong response for this one, you need to give an example of traditional culture. What do you mean by traditional culture?
Home culture?
Sorry?
Like our back home culture?
Okay, so this, let me give you an example of how one student got into a bit of trouble with this. She said that traditional culture affects how people read, for example, that people used to spend a lot of time reading books, but because of modern communication technology, they spend most of their time in front of a screen. But the problem with that argument is that whether I'm reading a paper book or reading off an iPad, I'm still reading, right? So it doesn't really affect reading. She also mentioned that it affects that people don't spend much time writing letters anymore. But my response to that is, people probably write 10 times as much than they ever did in the past. So the fact that it's not a paper and pencil letter, but it's an email instead, it's not clear how that affects the culture of writing. Right? What she could have said is, if maybe writing with a brush, like, you know, if you see like traditional Chinese movies, they do this beautiful brushwork.
Yeah, calligraphy.
Calligraphy, exactly. If she'd argued that modern communication technology is destroying the tradition of calligraphy, that would be an easier argument to make. Right? But just writing, I don't think that's going to work. Another student got into trouble by saying that because of modern technology, so many people have trouble going back to China for the Spring Festival. And one of the traditions during the Spring Festival is grandparents give their grandkids red envelopes with money. So what she said is, so because the kids are not going back to China for the Spring Festival because they're all over the world and it's expensive to travel, that grandparents are using technology to electronically send their kids money instead of red envelopes. So this argument had problems on two levels. The first problem is it's similar to the reading and writing situation. If the culture is giving your kids or giving your grandkids money in a red envelope, and there's an app that allows you to do the same thing, then that tradition is still the same, isn't it? It's like arguing that, I mean, whether I mail you a package or hand deliver a package, you're still getting the package, right? Whether I go to Toys R Us to buy my nephew a gift, or whether I order it from Amazon and have it shipped there to his house, then it's kind of the same thing. The other issue was talking about technology resulting in Chinese people being unable to physically attend Spring Festival in China. That's not really related to technology. That's related to people traveling and leaving the country.
Excuse me, sir.
Yep.
You just told us that as far as like what you write in an essay manner, it doesn't like the examiner will see the idea that what you are writing, not your idea. The examiner is not focusing on your idea, but he's focusing the way you deliver or you write the essay. So does it matter what we are writing? It has to be very accurate, like.
It can't be obviously wrong.
Okay.
Like, if a reasonable, ordinary person can poke holes in your argument, then you're probably not getting a band 7. If you're saying things that most people know are not true.
Mm-hmm.
Another way, like when I say this, yes, it's okay to make things up. You can't make up cuckoo crazy stuff. Like one student was giving examples of his neighbor, the CEO of IBM. Or he was saying that his neighbor's son is the CEO of IBM,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it does not come across well.
Mr. Yan,
Yep.
like in this question, can I, like, for the first question, I disagree, and the second question, I agree?
Don't do that.
Okay.
Your position on the issue has to be clear throughout. That's a band 7 criterion. And if you have one paragraph in favor and one paragraph against, then what's your position?
Okay, but in this question, like for the first one, if I disagree, the second one, like I cannot disagree because technology and traditional cultures are incompatible. Like they are opposite.
Mhm.
Like it's true they are opposite because I think technology does not relate it to tradition. Sometimes technology helps the tradition.
Mhm. So then your answer is you disagree, and you give
Yes,
two reasons.
yes, I disagree.
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
it is not double questions. It's only related to one idea.
Yeah, these two sentences are saying the same thing.
Oh, so yeah, I disagree.
Okay, so what are your reasons for disagreeing?
Like for example, let's say, like I don't know if it is like for some people their tradition is like to go on the ocean or the sea to fish with the, like let's say, wood yacht or something, but with our like new technology, the fast boat, the machines they use to fish, it is helping the tradition. Like if they are living on this. The second thing is also like, as you said, like for example, like in festivals, technology help people to communicate with each other, even if they are like overseas or a long distance. So it's
But
helping the
but,
tradition.
but communication, it's hard to argue that talking to your friends and family is a tradition.
No, I mean in festivals, like in Christmas, in Eid, it's a traditional, it's a culture, which like if without technology, like people cannot talk if they are in different countries. So technologies help people to practice their tradition in the festivals.
But what part of the festival is technology helping with? You're saying the communication part, right?
Yes. So like technology will not uh, make the traditions will be
But
lost.
but but you're not talking about the tradition. You're just talking about a very narrow part of the tradition, which is simply communication between people. So that's not the actual tradition. That'd be like saying, okay, could you argue that technology is helping or hurting Christmas or Eid?
Like I think it doesn't matter. Maybe.
Helping, I think. It varies from tradition to tradition. It's helping in Christmas and Eid because we have to
I
send.
think
Yeah.
I think this is a question before like maybe 2 or 3 years. I got it in IELTS for speaking
IELTS.
IELTS,
Hmm.
and I couldn't answer at that time.
All right. So this is why everyone's struggling. Can you think of some traditional cultures? Well,
Yeah.
when you hear the phrase traditional culture, what does that mean to you? Like when I hear that, I think of native cultures, indigenous peoples,
Yeah, me too.
right? I think that's what they are looking for.
Yeah. So how come this fishing and everything else is fitting in this traditional culture?
Well, in native culture, technology affected the culture
Yeah.
because in native tradition, um, I'll tell you a story about Japan that makes this maybe a little bit more clear. In traditional Japanese culture, the samurai were at
Yeah.
the top of the social hierarchy,
Mm-hmm.
right? The samurai were the people who trained their whole lives to fight with swords.
Yeah.
And then guns came along,
Yeah.
and any peasant after an hour of training, could then kill a samurai in battle. So what did Japan do? Japan realized that the firearm threatened their entire social hierarchy. So they banned firearms for a period of time. And at this point, Japanese-made firearms were the highest quality firearms in the world, and they just banned them because it upset their traditional culture. So in that sense, that modern technology was incompatible with traditional Japanese culture. In other native hunting traditions, using a bow and arrow or a spear was part of the culture, and then firearms came along. Now, I'm not sure how much firearms affected native traditions. Did this have a deep, profound effect on them, or were they like, hey, this is even better? Right, so I'm not sure how to answer that one, but that's the Japanese example sort of shows you the effect of technology on culture. So can anyone think of an example of how technology might be affecting culture? Like another thing that occurred to me was maybe traditional weaving.
Traditional what?
Weaving, like a kind of sewing
Yeah.
that maybe kids are not interested anymore because it's so cheap to just go and buy your clothes rather than learn how to weave.
Sewing, knitting.
Mhm. So it's pronounced sewing.
Sewing.
It's spelled sewing, but it's pronounced sewing.
And knitting.
Knitting, yeah.
Knitting. Yeah, this is maybe it's a great example because we were used to do these activities a lot.
We used to.
Yeah, we used to.
Yeah. Can anyone think of any other examples? How it either helps or hurts?
But here that we stopped doing this traditional culture because of the advancement of technology related to this subject, or in general, people like they got busy in other, for children, for example, or
See,
teenager.
that's the problem. How do you make that connection?
Yes.
So is it technology had a direct effect, or is it because of the indirect effects of technology?
Yes, direct and indirect. I think
Okay.
any one of them, it's okay, either direct or indirect.
We can talk about the online classes, which can affect the tradition of going to schools. Is that related?
It's a tradition, but is it culture?
Traveling by horses and nowadays airplane.
Right, but is that culture?
Before, like
that would be a traditional transportation method, but I don't think anyone is sad that they're driving a car instead of riding a horse.
Yeah, you're right.
Learning a new language.
Maybe
Changing a new language.
doing the bread at home, cooking that.
Right, but that's the same as this, right? But then these are all indirect effects of technology making people lazier in a sense. Even lazier is not very charitable. Let's say people inclined to just order whatever they want instead of making it. But it's not a direct effect of technology.
Okay, we can say in agriculture sector, technology made people to stop use animals for شنو يزرع for when they use animal to break the earth for then they like
Digging?
before they used to use animal for like in agricultural sector, but now they are using machines which changed the tradition of using animals.
But was that culture or just a
Culture.
tradition? Like, did people use animals because it was an important part of the culture, or did they just use animals because they had no choice? I don't know if any farmer would say, wow, I wish I used a bull instead of a tractor.
So
I think any farmer would prefer to use a machine than.
Yeah, but
Mhm.
okay. The issue is not culture.
It's not culture, it's just a tool.
So if we want to concentrate about culture, I think we have to talk either about language or about food or costume, something related to the culture. Maybe now the way of whatever we are, the way what we are dressing now is different because nobody wear their own costume.
Everyone's dressing the same, right?
Same, yeah.
But it is clothes related to tradition, culture.
Yes, yes.
Your clothes are culture.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, just pick any traditional kind of clothing that people wear. Just, you can explain very briefly maybe why people used to wear those clothes. And then to say these days, everyone's wearing the same thing, the same brands, because of mass media. So the trick is to explain how one thing is causing the other thing to happen. So if we talk about traditional languages, English is the language of the internet. Yes, there's a lot of Chinese, there's a lot of German too, but most websites in the world, if you add up how much of each language is used, most of them are in English.
Yeah, maybe language is an example. Like, for example, now with the globalization or we are traveling, see for our young generation, okay, maybe they still can communicate in our native language, but other skill of writing in Arabic or it's now start to be fade out, or because now we know, okay, English is important and they are continuing doing everything in English. So can we relate? But this is
Yeah, that's the easy way to answer this question. Everyone in the whole world is copying the dances that they see on TV. When I was in China, I used to live on campus, and you'd see groups of students getting together late at night, and they were just for fun learning dance routines. But they weren't traditional Chinese dance routines. They were dance routines that they saw from American music videos. Right? I would mention that as an anecdote if I were writing this. Traditional clothes, same brands around the world, right? There's no way to tell people apart anymore. And I often tell people when I moved to China in 2005, when I got there, like on my way there, I was expecting culture shock. But when I actually got there, I didn't feel any culture shock. Right? You look around, you see people wearing the same clothes, driving the same cars, the same fast food restaurants are popping up that you see in Canada and the United States. So people only wear traditional clothes during festivals, and it's like it's almost like going to a museum when you see one of these festivals. It's not part of the daily life. You say traditional food is the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Diabetic food.
Exactly. So here, the connection that's missing still here for this kind of thing is media. Is there anything else we can say about this? I'm gonna
Sleep habits.
get rid of this one. And in what way are sleep habits related?
Like before, people used to sleep early and wake up early, but nowadays, due to lifestyle and everything, they usually they sleep late and wake up late.
Is that culture or is that lifestyle?
It was before it was culture, but now it's lifestyle.
Okay, so that's not going to be such an easy argument to make. You're going to confuse the interviewer or the examiner, who's not going to understand the difference between those two unless you spend a lot of time explaining
Okay.
why it's culture and not just lifestyle.
Mhm.
Okay, I don't know if you need a deeper explanation than this.
But I think culture is like the old tools they used to use before, like what is culture? Because like even like the language, like they had no choice of it. So like if we talk about culture, like I don't know, like traditional culture,
So
like
then,
everything in old ages they used to think about it culture, like even
Well, think about it this way. You can distinguish between small C culture and big C culture. Small C culture can mean anything that you do. Like the kind of food you cook for lunch can be small C culture. That's just the culture of your household. But big C culture would be, like capital C culture would be the cultural practices that define a people. Oh, these people are a distinct group of people because they do this and this differently from everyone else. This defines such people.
I think Ala is confused about what is the meaning of culture, why we chose language or custom, and faith is part of the culture.
Mm-hmm. Like
I
religion would be part of your culture,
yeah
language, like meaningful dances, old-fashioned dance, not stuff you see on TikTok, right? But
Yeah, but
traditional dance.
but like religion, like even like how technology will affect my religion, and how technology, okay, maybe let's say in even in clothes, like clothes, because the companies are producing a new costumes. So like even you said like small group of people, that doesn't indicate like culture. Like let's say small group of people who wears like wears old fashioned, and the group of people who still use animals for, let's say, an agricultural sector. So still the same, who are like concentrating on one thing and stick to their culture.
Then how is technology affecting them? Because that's what you have to talk about. You can say, no, these people have managed to preserve their culture in spite of technology.
Increasing the knowledge of the people. Like technology increase the education of people, increase the awareness of people, reading more.
Okay, so you can continue with that line of argumentation, but you need to have an example that brings it to life. Because right now it's kind of an abstraction.
Yeah.
Like, can you think of a good example to bring that to life?
Like reading on the internet for and I don't know.
You could make an argument, I'm just thinking out loud, but with religion, for example. You can say that access to technology, it has an effect of eliminating the magic of life. As another example of native cultures, when they wanted explanations, or when they provided explanations for natural phenomena, then severe storms, for example, would be the anger of the gods. Or unusual weather patterns would be the actions of spirits or animal spirits. But then with modern technology, you have modern scientific explanations for natural phenomena. So all the notion of ghosts and spirits controlling what happens in the natural world, all of that disappears. And with that, traditional culture disappears too, because science has a logical explanation for everything.
Yes. Could be like before, maybe they used to believe in things. Now science like changed that.
Right. There's no more belief anymore. You don't need to believe anything because science has an explanation. So your beliefs just...
Yes, this is what I'm saying. Like the development, which based on science, like change these thoughts or thinking.
Or let's say, from my own experience, this hasn't happened yet, but I know it's going to happen any day, that my kid is going to Google, is Santa real? Right? He's going to Google it, and he's going to get an answer, and there goes that culture, right?
Yeah.
right? Or let's say your kid looks up, is there a God, on Google? And the first websites that come up are maybe websites written by scientists or by atheists, right? And then then you have all these uncomfortable questions from your kids. So the internet does the internet does eliminate the magic of traditional life, all of our traditional explanations. Right? People ask, oh, is it possible that, anyway, I'm not going to go down that road because we could talk about this for hours and hours, but I don't think we need such a deep explanation. I think this covers it, right? Just pick two of these: traditional clothes. Just say, thanks to the internet, everyone's wearing the same clothes. Traditional language, same thing. Thanks to the internet, everyone is learning English. Traditional languages are dying.
Traditional food.
Yeah, and this is true. Dozens of languages disappear every year. Here, as a personal anecdote, you can say, I've traveled extensively and see people wearing the exact same. Everywhere I go in the world, you go into anyone's house, it looks like it was designed by IKEA.
Yeah.
The whole planet is IKEA planet. What about traditional furniture?
Yeah.
Every table, every bookcase in the world has to look the same. Okay.
Nowadays, yes.
So the mechanism here is mass media. Everyone keeps seeing the same models of reality. People dress the same ads for the same kinds of food, the same language is being used, music videos. It's the same song. They just change the lyrics. They just change the language of the lyrics, but the music is exactly the same underneath, right? It's the same beats, the same tune. They just change the lyrics. I think those are the easiest ways to answer this question. All right, any other questions or comments related to this prompt?
So if we give two examples, like if we finish one example and we will start the second example at the same time, will it be a run over sentence?
Well, for an agree-disagree prompt, you need two supporting reasons. Each of your body paragraphs is going to be one of those reasons. And it tells you to include examples. So you should have one example in each body paragraph. So if I were to talk about traditional dance and music and traditional clothes,
Then in one paragraph, first paragraph, we have to discuss the traditional dance, and in second paragraph, we have to discuss the traditional clothes. Just like,
yes.
okay, so we have to make two different paragraphs for two examples.
I might put these two together
Mm-hmm.
as one paragraph, and I might spend another paragraph developing this idea. It depends on how quickly the ideas are flowing. I would write an outline format first to see how much I can talk about two of these, and then that'll determine how I group them. So Ala, is that kind of clear about the difference between culture versus just tools that people use or habits that people have?
Yes, it's clear.
Did you ever hear that story about the grandmother when she was cutting a roast? There's a grandmother, whenever she was baking a roast, she would always cut off the corners of the meat. And then her daughter, who obviously grew up watching her mother cook this way, would also cut the corners off the roast. And many, many years later, her daughter, when she was learning how to cook a roast from her mom, she saw her mom cutting the corners off, and the daughter goes, "Oh, why are we cutting the corners off the roast?" And her mom goes, "Well, Grandma always made it this way." And she goes, "Why?" And her mom goes, "Well, I don't know. It's just our tradition." And then the young girl, she's visiting her grandmother one day, says, "Grandma, why do we cut the corners off the roast? I don't understand this tradition in our family." And her grandmother goes, "Well, when I was growing up, we didn't have too much money, or we didn't have too much money, and I only had one roasting pan. And the roast was just a little bit too big for the roasting pan, so I had to cut off the corners to make it fit."
So that's why she's cutting
Yeah.
the corners.
Yeah, there's no good reason for it. It's just a very practical reason.
Yeah, because like there'll be less tools in the before, like, and she learned that.
Yeah, so if our tools change, it's not necessarily a cultural thing. It's just this is just how we do things because of our practical requirements.
Yeah.
Right? A farmer is using a mule or a bull to pull his plow because he doesn't have any money. But if you offered him a tractor, he'd much rather use a tractor than an animal.
Yeah, definitely.
How to argue the opposite point of view, those arguments are not occurring to me very easily. I think your traditional hunting and fishing example could work. That maybe with like traditional fishermen, they can use GPS and sonar to catch more fish using traditional methods. All right, so in that case, it could help. Or let's say you could use this example. You can say, my grandmother sews traditional clothes, and ever since she picked up some modern sewing machines, she's able to, by herself, produce more traditional clothes. And because she's producing more in the same amount of time, she's able to sell them at a lower price, which means more people are buying them. And in that sense, she is helping our traditional culture spread because she sews traditional looking clothes.
So it could like help, right?
Yeah, it could help in that sense because a single person now has access to all kinds of machinery that lets them produce much more single-handedly. So it's like in technology, they would call this mass customization. Do you know what that refers to?
It is not talking about the benefits of technology. It is talking about is it the culture is um, like diminishing and the technology is taking place. So we have, like, this example is not fit, because if we talk about the benefits of technology, we can say this. But if the discussion is about that the traditional culture is diminishing or replaced by a technology, is it true or no? So does this example fits here?
It doesn't say replaced by, it just says they're incompatible.
Yeah, incompatible, yeah.
So you have to explain what that connection is. What is the technology doing that's getting rid of the traditional culture?
Like in first sentence, it is inevitable that traditional culture will be lost as the technology develops. So this means the technology is replacing the traditional culture. So we have to discuss this, isn't it?
Yes, but there's two ways to approach that. One is the technology is directly responsible for obviating traditional culture. Here's a good word. It's a $100 word. Do you know the word obsolete?
Yeah.
So obviate means to make obsolete.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the word I was using. So you can say that technology is directly obviating traditional culture, or you can make the argument that technology is facilitating the spread of ideas from the dominant culture. Bless
And
you.
if we say disagree, so which means we need to talk about things that technology helps to or support the traditional clothes, traditional culture.
Yeah, so that's the clearest example that I can think of. Let's say my grandmother makes traditional clothes and she bought some machinery that allows her to sew more clothes by herself. As an example, are you familiar with the cricket?
Yes.
Yes, this is what the Indians play.
Okay, the cricket is a machine. It's a machine for
Cricket?
yeah, that's just the brand name. It's a machine for cutting fabric. So my wife bought one, and the thing is insanely cool. It's the size of like a printer, not a big printer, and it's you know how an inkjet printer just has the ink head that goes back and forth and sprays down the ink?
Yeah.
So this machine has blades. It has a knife.
Uh-huh.
So you put fabric into the machine, and then you choose the pattern that you want, and the machine will automatically cut out your pattern.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're sewing clothes, you know how, like, my mom used to sew some clothes at home, my grandmother used to sew some clothes at home. So when I was watching them, they'd have these big giant sheets of fabric spread out on a table, and then they would use this
Iron, I think, yeah.
yeah, they'd use this white chalk to draw the outline of what they needed to cut out, right?
Yes.
So this machine does all that cutting for you automatically. So if my mom had had one of these machines, she probably could have sewed several times as much clothing in the same amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yes.
and this machine's pretty cheap too. Like if you like making crafts at home, it'll cut out cardboard, it'll cut out fabric. I'm trying not to advertise this machine, but it is really amazing what technology is allowing to happen. If you're making, let's say every summer down in the beaches, there's these traditional art festivals where you have all these craftsmen that are selling their homemade goods. A lot of people like to carve things out, or they make like small sculptures. Again, you can buy a 3D printer, or you can buy a laser cutter. And instead of carving out wooden sculptures by hand, you can have this laser cutter that will literally cut out pieces of metal, pieces of wood. It'll just burn them out, and it's obviously much, much easier than doing this by hand. Or a 3D printer that will just print some kind of design. So using those kinds of examples, you could argue that technology can help save traditional cultures, because instead of this one craftsman being able to make one of these little crafts every day, maybe now he can make 10, which means he can sell them for much cheaper, and more people now have a chance to buy these traditional crafts. So you could argue in that way, he's helping to save traditional culture by using modern technology. So that's the other side of the argument. Okay?
Okay.
All right, do you want to move on?
Yes.